Why do people keep losing their lives on Mount Everest? It was once said to be the holy grail of mountaineering. Conquering Mount Everest, that rather lonely mountain top nestled among the stars, where very few human beings have dared to go. Today, it's almost like standing in line at Disneyland to ride the Matterhorn. Only you might not make it back alive. Climbing right to the top is no longer an accomplishment for only peak athletes who train for several years before facing one of the greatest physical challenges of their lives. Now, it's almost like a joke. People who actually sign up to climb the tallest peak do it just so they can brag about how they managed to climb the world's tallest peak. There isn't any physical fitness requirement, only a financial fitness requirement. And it isn't any less terrifying than it was back in 1953 when the famous Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay went on to become the first confirmed climbers to ever reach the summit. Climbing Mount Everest is so unsafe that one stretch on the north side is even called Rainbow Ridge, not because it's all sunshine and rainbows but because all the deceased bodies are wearing brightly colored climbing gear. And yet people still climb this mountain because no one ever really thinks it will happen to them. So why so many bodies? Everest climbers have varied causes of demise, but here are the most common and why there has been a spike recently. Mount Everest is over 29,000 feet tall. Knowing that, you might just be tempted to believe that the major cause of demise on the mountain is falling, but alas, that is just the second most common cause. According to reports, most people who lose their lives on Everest are victims of avalanches. The third most common cause of demise on the mountain is exposure or even frostbite, which accounts for almost 11% of fatalities, followed quite closely by acute mountain sickness. Around 27% of Everest fatalities are also listed as other, which could easily include things like falling ice, pneumonia, rope accidents or even drowning. Also, a bit counterintuitive is that more people lose their life on the way down from the summit rather than on the way up. But route preparation is incredibly unsafe too. A total of 120 people have also lost their lives while working on the routes, with a handful more succumbing at base camp, en route to the base camp, or even during an evacuation. So really, the moral of the story is that you're not safe anywhere on Mount Everest. Mount Everest is also one of the most remote locations on the planet. Depending on how you actually measure it, it is the world's tallest peak, and it is also one of the planet's greatest physical challenges. It takes about 10 days only to get to the base camp in Nepal, around 6 weeks to acclimatize, and almost another 9 days to climb to the top. It's also quite expensive. The bottom dollar figure for a simple Mount Everest expedition is just about $30,000, with an average cost of nearly $65,000. And yet one of the things that have been taking the lives of people on Mount Everest is something most of us wouldn't really expect, and it's traffic. According to NPR, the traffic that's making people lose their lives is foot traffic. Modern Everest has become a tourist trap, and even on the perfect climbing day, you might just encounter hundreds of other climbers, all of whom are busy trying to get to the exact same spot. So you will have to wait in line. Yes, almost like your favorite theme park, even Everest has a queue. The difference is that if you stand for too long in a line at a theme park, the only pain that you'll experience is the endless whining of children. However, if you do wait for too long in line at Mount Everest, you might just run out of oxygen. You can climb Everest from 2 base camps, one is in Nepal, and the other is located in Tibet and is operated by the Chinese. China and Nepal were once quite selective about who got to go up the mountain. In fact, reports have even said that up until 1985, Nepal had allowed just one expedition on each route at a time. But Nepal is not a very wealthy nation, and a single climbing permit easily costs $11,000. That represents a very significant income for Nepal. In total, the climbing industry is worth almost about $300 million a year. The Nepalese government had issued 381 permits in 2019 and had absolutely no intention of scaling back that year despite the surprisingly high demise toll ever since 2015. No matter how hard you train or even how physically fit you are, once you do reach a particular elevation, it gets incredibly tough, and you still have about 4,000 feet to go. At that point, you're already racing against your own mortality. In fact, that last 4,000 feet is called the demise zone because it's where several climbers lose their lives. Climbers can suffer from cardiac arrest, stroke, and even altitude sickness. Fluid can easily accumulate in the lungs, even leading to altitude pulmonary edema, which can cause a cough that is sometimes so incredibly severe that it can crack a rib. The low oxygen can even lead to transient blindness or hemorrhage in the blood vessels of the eyes. And the entire experience is so physically taxing that one study has found that Everest climbers usually lose between 10 and 20 pounds. It might just be better to stay off Everest no matter who you are.